Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. In today's video, we're going to continue with our Back to Basics series. I said in the beginning we were going to do first aid, then knife safety, then move into fire, then into cooking. Fire is where we're at, and it could be a very lengthy topic. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to break this up into two parts. First part, we're going to talk about the basic science of building a fire. And yes, unfortunately, there is science involved. And talk about tinder, kindling, and that kind of stuff, and where all of this falls in to just getting a fire started. In the second part, we'll actually talk about the different types of fuel sizes, the different types of fire lays, and so forth from there, and what the purpose for each one is and what they're good for. But in this first one, I wanted to talk about the basics of getting that fire started. First of all, it takes three things to get a fire started. You have to have fuel, you have to have heat, and you have to have oxygen. If you lose any one of those three, the fire will go out. Now, the fire service, people who are in the fire department and do that kind of stuff, know that they refer to that as the fire triangle. Each one of the three things makes up a side of the triangle. Take away one part and you lose the triangle. And I agree with that. But at the same time, I also think of it as a circle. Because once you get that fire going, all three are constantly working with each other to keep it going. And if you lose any one of the three, it's going to go out. Now, the number one thing to remember when starting a fire, and this comes with your tinder and your kindling, up to stuff maybe about as big around as your thumb. Fire loves chaos. There is no perfect way of laying everything together to get that fire to grow. Remember the three things. As long as you have those three things and it's just in a gob with everything turned every which way, fire loves chaos. Fire is a living, breathing thing, and it loves to move through and around all different things that you have. So you want to keep it somewhat chaotic when first building that fire. The reason for that is all of that chaos creates air gaps. It creates place for the stuff below it to burn and the fire to grow, for the fire to get air, and so forth. If you've ever taken a bundle of grass and try to light a bundle of grass, that end that's all frayed out in every which direction will light just like that and go up in a flame. You take the same thing and take it down to the bundle about that big around and tie off each end and cut it off and just leave that bundle and try to light that bundle. It's harder as all get out to get that bundle to light because there's no air gaps, there's no chaos in it for the fire to move through. So you have to have that chaos when you're starting your fire. And I'll show you an example of that when we get to part two. Now, there are all kinds of man-made fire tenders out there. There's fire plugs, cotton balls with Vaseline, cotton balls with rubbing alcohol, fire paste, Esbic fire tabs, fuel tabs, wet fire tabs. There's all sorts of stuff out there to be used that are man-made. And they have their place. They are really, really helpful when you're building a fire with marginal tinder. And by marginal doesn't always mean damp or wet or green. Marginal can be size. If for some odd reason all you've got is stuff that big that you're trying to build a fire with, a fuel tab or a man-made fire tinder will work great to get stuff like this burning, because it's got that extended burn time to do that. Now, if you're using stuff like this, then a fuel tab or a man-made tinder is great, but you don't necessarily need it, just because of the fact of, get it up where you can see it. Look at all the different sizes. You've got real small curls, you've got bigger curls, you've got bigger pieces in there. When you're dealing with stuff like that, that is more conducive to starting a fire with a bow drill ember, a ferro rod, flint and steel, char cloth. The finer the material, the easier it's going to be to get that flame, no matter what type of method you're using to start it. But when you start getting into things outside of man-made tinder or a lighter or something like that, and you start getting into the bow drills, the char cloth, flint and steel, and the ferro rods, the material is going to have to be finer for those to actually work, because you don't have the heat that is generated by man-made fire tabs or man-made tinders. So starting the fire out, you're going to want stuff like the shavings. You're going to want stuff this size. You're going to want stuff the size of a pencil. You're going to want sticks to gradually increase from shavings up to stuff about the size of your thumb. And preferably, you're not going to go from a handful of stuff like this to something that size all at once. You're going to want different sizes in between to get a good base of coals. Once you get that base of coals, then maintaining that fire is going to be easier. But you're still going to have to watch what you do. Because if you get a good solid base of coals, and then you start pouring logs that big around on top of that bed of coals, it's going to lay there and it's going to smoke and it's going to smolder and it's going to carry on. And you're going to have to blow and blow and blow to add oxygen to that bed of coals to get the heat up to initially ignite that bigger tinder. And it's going to take a whole lot more to ignite something that big on a bed of coals than it's going to be to ignite something the size of a nickel or the size of a quarter. But we'll talk about that in the second part of this video, where we actually get out and build a fire. Remember, gotta have those three things. Gotta have heat, oxygen, and fuel to start and maintain a fire. And once you get it lit, then they all work together to keep it going. I'm going to end it right here before we get into much more, because we're to the point where now it's going to start getting into actually growing that fire into a cook fire or a fire for warmth or whatever, and making it bigger than just that initial start. So we'll cover the rest of it in the next video. So be patient. We had another big rain the other day. I've got water standing in the backyard again. Once it dries out, we'll get out here. I checked. I keep my fire pit covered out here behind the house that I use in a lot of my videos. I lifted the cover off of it and it's full of water. So I couldn't start a fire in it if I wanted to right now, unless I figured out a way to make it float. But once things dry out a little bit, hopefully in 3 or 4 days it'll dry out and we can get out here and work on the second part of this. So there we are. Short, sweet, to the point. Just the bare basics on what you need to get a fire started, the science behind it, and then talking about tenders and so forth from there. So like, share, subscribe. I'll get another video for you soon. Have a good one.